Welcome, Amy, to the Chill Like a Mother podcast. I'm Kayla, an expressive art therapist who helps moms unload all the heaviness and all of the stuff that comes with motherhood because truthfully, it just doesn't have to be so friggin' hard. Amy, tell me about joining the Mom Club and how long it took you to become a member.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's how it felt. I was child free. I would say, it was really for a lot of people like in their early 20s when they start thinking about being a parent, because that's when everybody starts to do it. And that's when, your parents are pressuring you to do it. And, everyone's asking and other people are getting pregnant and saying, you're next. And then 20 years goes by of not being in the club. That's a long time of dealing with the same disappointments and hurts and stuff like that. But then one day you're in the club and you're like, uh-oh, I didn't want to pay these dues, but it's an experience to go through that long process of waiting and then having been on both sides of the fence, it just changes your perspective and everything.
Can you share with our listeners how you managed to get through the years of that?
The only thing I think that really helped me cope was knowing that I had other creative strengths, other things going on in my life. And I knew a lot of people that I'd spoken to over the years who always sort of used their kids as like a convenient scapegoat for why they can't get anything done, why are they not more productive, and on some level it's just like, well, I have all this free time. I don't have a kid, that needs me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Um, Let me fill it. Let me fill it with either going back to school or going in another route, which is where I sort of went, which was sort of doing my own approach to understanding the publishing industry and writing my books and doing all of that research and networking. And obviously, yeah, that takes up a lot of time. And I sort of threw myself into that world intentionally, saying, this is the only thing that sort of helps me forget some days. And it helps me channel any sort of like angst or grief into it. So I say, at the end of the day, I've accomplished something, even if it isn't the thing I'm really wanting to accomplish.
You're using that as an outlet for coping, and I dare say like a little bit of like self-care and like
Yeah, for
channeling.
sure.
The way that I talk about expressive art therapy for people when they can't quite wrap their head around it is that it's just the container. It's the container for your grief or your anxiety or depression. I mean, and the container is vast and it's different and it changes, and there can be a container for the pain you feel in a relationship, and it can be a container for
Hmm.
processing grief or life transition. And so you're using your writing as part of a container.
The irony is that I thought it was going to be that, because I know people in the industry who write through their grief, and that's an amazing thing. And it is something that I have done. But the act of being a writer and being an author and the whole scheme of trying to understand the publishing industry is a whole job in itself that I feel is often required in parenting. Like, you have a rough day with your kid the day before, and you say, well, we're going to sleep it off and we're going to wake up tomorrow and we're going to try again. And I feel like all of that, was getting like stored up in my body. And I was putting it in other things. Like, it wasn't just the act of sitting down and typing out words or typing out the grief, which is all part of it as well.
Yeah.
It's developing that resilience at the same time.
Do you think that resilience has transferred into motherhood, or have you had to learn it again on the other side of the fence?
Uh, it's so funny because What I found, I would say immediately, like a postpartum, was I had a lot of anxiety around, am I going to do this right? Because I've had a lot of time to practice, so I better, because when I was child free, I was taking child development courses. I was taking like child psychology courses, and I was getting smart in the way that you think you are when you're a child free person about do you're going to do it right. You're going to do it better, and and then you have that immediate thing of like, this is my child, and everything I do is because of them and who they are, and not who I think I am and what I want. And that's something you just don't learn until it's a thing happening in front of you. But I did try. I said, okay, I want my kid to be perfect. Everybody wants their kid to be perfect. I don't want my kid to ever feel any pain or be unhappy. I never want my kid to deal with any of the things that I dealt with. And that's just so unrealistic. And the resilience factor comes from saying, okay, dummy, stop being so unrealistic and deal with the situation at hand. you
Mm.
know, Cope with the thing. You didn't think she was going to be born with jaundice, but you're going to have to figure that out. She was 2 weeks early. You weren't planning on that. Figure it out. So yeah, I think I take a lot of that. It's just like every day, it's just like, how do we not have a meltdown and figure this out and just move forward?
Mhm. 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 What does lowering your expectations look like for
Yeah.
you? You know, like
Yeah.
for I think for every person it might be a little bit different, but generally, can you see that playing out in your day? Is there a ritual or is there like something that you do to like catch yourself in it?
Honestly, like, I think my expectations are just already low. Like, I don't know if that's how I cope with it. Just the humor of it. It's like, I expected to have a kid at 25. So the bar's on the floor already after having one at 39. I, you know, every time anything good happens, I get to raise the bar a little bit off the floor. But I already have that mentality of like, this is good. Things are good, good enough. Don't expect the moon in these real life situations. It's just not how life is. And I think if you take that approach in parenting, like, that your 2-year-old is going to have tantrums, and they're going to take off their diaper and they're going to run around and they're going to become obsessed with a hairbrush. If you know going in that those things are going to happen, like, you're not like completely blown back when they do. And you can, you don't even need to cope in that moment. You just say, oh, okay, yeah, she's gonna act like a 2-year-old today because she's 2. Let's deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard you say, you were trying to study to become kind of a good mom or, what you think a good mom is. Can you share what that experience was like for you?
It really started in early college years as a need to pay my way. I found that the I always had a love of nurturing children in like an academic setting, but it was the most convenient thing to work around my schedule was to teach preschool. And I would teach preschool during the day, and then I would go to class at night for something completely unrelated. I was going for like comparative literature and poetry and stuff, but I was teaching 1-year olds ABCs in the morning. And then a lot went into that. Is my first boss was just this most amazing, like, sort of academically minded person around teaching children. Like, he understood the benefit of teaching young children, that he didn't want his classroom to just be like a daycare where parents dump their kid and they just sat there all day while so the parent, like that kind of thing. He wanted the parent to show up feeling good about what their child had learned that day, that they were happy and well fed and becoming well-rounded little people. And so he taught me so much of these sort of like psychological theories around teaching children that I would not have learned otherwise, because that was not my wheelhouse. And I learned so many things, like the Montessori method and the Rye method, and all of these things of how to understand children, what's going on inside their head, instead of having that authoritative, this is how we learn, and like going and getting down and dirty in their world, and understanding things at their eye level, things like that. And that fascinated me. I was like, there's another option. Like, there's another way to like raise children besides, being authoritative and bossy, you know, and I said, oh, I have to keep going with this. Like, I want to know as much, because I guess that my brain is just like a sponge. I just want to learn everything about a thing that fascinates me. And so over the process, I've been in situations where I worked at other places that were not, they were the daycare. They did not, they didn't care. I mean, it's sad that they exist. They're there to take the parents' money. And then, the kids sit there and eat crackers all day and then they go home. Like, that's just how some of their models are.
Mhm.
But the good places, I think, it's not just a marketing ploy. They really try, and the teachers they hire actually care. And so I always sought out those places. I always wanted to see. Some of my best friends in the whole world are preschool teachers that I met over the years, who were like, "Aren't you a writer?" And like, "Yeah, but this is really, I still care about this," and so I had that sort of, that building of like all of those building blocks of it going in. And then every year, and the same people were like, when are you going to have a kid? Like, you'd make such a great mom, and you know so much about this stuff. And like, I can't even imagine like how amazing your kid's going to be when you finally have one. And like, so much pressure. But eventually I do take that in every day. I really care about my daughter's literacy. I care about, if she feels understood. I care, about the best way to handle her big emotions when she has those inevitable tantrums, um, and not making her feel badly for not being able to express herself, the way that I would express myself in the situation. Like, I like this brush. I want to hold it all day, kind of thing. I'm talking about the brush. That was the thing. Have you heard of the unbrush?
No.
It's like this a magical brush that's all over like TikTok and Instagram and everything, and it completely just detangles your hair like after like just a couple brush throughs. No matter how, and my hair is very thick, it gets tangled really easily. So I was like, I need this. And I got it. I got one for me and I got one for my daughter. And the first time I brushed her hair through with it, she grabbed it away from me and she held onto it like this. And she would not give it back. And she was like, it was a whole thing where I had to go into like preschool teacher mode. I'm like, okay, how do we handle this? Like, I don't want her to cry, and she's going to cry when I take it away. And how do I work through this transition? So it was like the first day I took it away, she cried. And we just went the next day, I brushed her hair again. She took it away from me, held it, took it away from her. She cried. I said, okay, well, we're going to put it in the closet. We're going to close the closet door and then we'll get it back out tomorrow. And so, like 2 or 3 days of that, finally on the fourth day, she was just like, bye, brush. And it went in the closet, and it only comes out for 10 minutes every day and goes back in the closet. But yeah, it was the whole thing, you don't know, that's not in a psychology textbook,
No,
you
no,
know?
no. One night, my 2-year-old needed swim goggles, the 3 random dog stuffies that we had in the house. We had to go all over the house looking for the stuffies that he needed to sleep with that.
Mm,
There was at least 2 other like random kind of items that he needed to go to sleep. And I remember thinking, and this was my second, so I had some context to like how long these phases last. Um,
yeah.
but in my first, because I have a 9-year-old, and so the landscape of parenting and Instagram and, Dr. Becky was not online then, um, is very different. Gentle parenting wasn't quite mainstream yet.
Hmm.
And so anyway, I had some context to how long this phase would last. And so it was very interesting how I handled it the second time versus how I would have handled it the first time. The first time I probably would have been
Right.
more like, you don't need this shit to go to bed. Like you go to bed every night. This is ridiculous, right? Also, my first didn't have such attachment to things. My second has a little bit more of an attachment to items.
Hmm.
And so when he needed the swim goggles and the dog stuffies, and we had to go traipsing through the house for all these things, there was
Hmm.
something inside of me that was different, because I knew that the phase was temporary,
Hmm.
and that I really had to walk myself through some of that narrative of like, you're giving in, or you're like you're allowing. I think for some older generations, they would even view that as like
Right.
manipulation. Like they don't need these 4 things to go to sleep, right? Because as an adult, we like censor and we don't give ourselves permission, right? And
True.
so there was these moments, in my parenting where I was like in this like juxtaposition of like, am I giving in? Am I meeting
Mm.
his needs? I have the capacity tonight, but what if I don't have capacity next week to like go through the house and find all of the items? And I also have like
Right.
a screaming older child who needs me, And so there's just like all of these decisions just about, like, my example is like swim goggles and your example is like a brush. But there
Mhm.
there are these moments in parenting where you think, is this how the books told me I should respond? Is this how,
Exactly.
someone on Instagram who I trust and I value their opinion, is this how they would handle the parenting experience? Is this how my parents would have parented me?
Completely. Yeah.
And those
Yeah.
moments can be really complex.
I hate to say it, but I do go into a lot of my parenting thinking about how I was parented. I know coming from a position of somebody who didn't know they were neurodiverse until they were in their late 30s because my parents were like, oh, that's not a thing. you know, don't do those things. Just stop being weird. Like that's your job. Just
Shut it down.
go out in the world and don't embarrass us. That was my family was please don't embarrass us. And so, you work hard at those masking behaviors. You work
Yes.
hard at learning how to not be embarrassing. And you never get, one of the reasons I didn't let my daughter keep the brush is because I knew she would want to take it to bed with her, and then she would be up all night talking to the brush and not sleeping.
Yes.
So that's really the only time I ever take anything away from my child is if I know it's going to keep them up all night.
Yes.
But that often, I'm like, okay, does this make you happy? Here, take it. Like, and I know that I don't want to think of myself as permissive, but I know it's like, is it really going to hurt her to have this right now? Is it going to hurt anyone else? No. Okay, fine. Just, you know, whatever makes you happy for the next 20 minutes. I'm fine with that. Have you eaten? Have you slept well? Are you comfortable? Are you happy? Nothing else matters, you know? And I feel that as a parent, sometimes I catch myself or like, my daughter will do something silly and I'm just like, my daughter,
Yeah.
like deal with it. You think it's weird? I don't care, and I try to take the exact opposite approach to being like, oh, this is such a bad reflection on my parenting. And this is making me look really bad right now. Like, I
Yeah.
just don't even like think that way. Not how I function. So,
Yeah. 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 And the um the masking piece is, oh,
yeah.
first of all, so very real. Also late diagnosed ADHD. Once we started to see some, well, I mean, I saw tendencies in my son, my oldest, since he was about 3. So I
Mm.
kind of knew it was coming, but um the reality for me and my husband is that we also are both neurodiverse. And
Same.
I get asked sometimes, like, what's an example? Like, what, why might he do that in this scenario, but not in another scenario? Or, um,
Mm.
those hard parenting moments that people can describe, especially for mothers, because there is research to absolutely prove that children are like a ridiculous number of percentage worse for their mothers than for anybody else. And
Mm.
there can be this like conversation that happens, and my response is often, well, it's because he's masking in these moments. He could be
Mm.
like legitimately and genuinely regulated, for sure. There are those moments.
Right. Right.
But there are other moments where I can see it, like I can watch it unfolding at family functions or something, where like
Yeah.
he is holding himself back. And so, truthfully, sometimes it is like an emotional regulation. Like I don't put masking into the category of good or bad. It just is. And I think in certain situations, masking can be a skill. It can be a resource that we use. And in other situations, it is I want to hide a part of myself, or I don't feel safe, to show up in a
Right.
certain way. And so I think in some situations, even as adults, we use it as a resource and as a skill, but um, that that masking can be um, it's a real part of that neurodivergence, because as a child who grew up in the 80s and the 90s, it's like that those
Mhm.
were bad kids, right? The
Yep.
the
Yep.
people, truthfully, I don't feel any shame for getting my child diagnosed or medicated. But I
Good
think
for
my
you.
life would have been very different had I gotten an early diagnosis, because I would have been one of those kids then.
Yeah, it's very tricky. That was a very hard time. I remember that it was always like the delay. My daughter can't have ADHD because she's, bookish and, writes little plays and stuff. She's not like that little boy over there who keeps running back and forth into the wall for no reason. Like, like there's a divide there. We can't compare them. And that was a thing, like, I think for my child, if it were to come to that, the doctor's always like, oh, she's fine, she's fine, she's fine. They're still in that mode because she's only 2, but I know it's coming because, like you said, my partner and I are both neurodiverse, and so it's inevitable. But um, I don't want her to grow up with the anxiety that I feel have just recently sort of started to get over,
Mm,
like a little bit.
yes.
In that, in social situations or in professional situations or in situations like this, where you go, did I laugh at that joke too hard? Did I clear my throat too many times?
Did I
Do
push
I
it?
do I
Did
play
I
with
let
my hair too much when I'm on podcast interviews? Um, you know, I don't want her to have those mess of thoughts back in the back of her mind all the time about every little thing that she does. And if that's something that I can help alleviate for her, I mean, I feel like that would be huge because that's something in my life that's always kind of held me back. It's like, I can't have this conversation with Kayla because, if I sat for an hour and thought about it, I would think about all the reasons why I'm not qualified to have this conversation with her. And she's had, like the anxiety, the negative thoughts, the intrusive stuff of like, oh, like she's an expert on this topic. And I'm just a mom who writes books, like the talking yourself down. If I can just help one child not have that and it's mine, then I've done my job. But yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a
It
whole
is.
thing. You're just learning
Yes.
day by day.
It is a whole thing. And we've gone like full circle from like the attempt to have a child, the journey, the money, the time, the emotions, to go through that. And they're
Yeah,
here, and you're in the mom club, because you're not in the club till you're in the club, right? And like
right.
then you're
Exactly.
in the club and you're on the other side of the fence, and you're like, take me back. is there a hidden portal where I can like go back to my child-free life? I love being a mom, but man, I miss child-free life. And I think that can be true whether you have a child at 19 or 39. And there's
Mm.
just this like, there's this juxtaposition of I equally love it and I equally want it to stop. And so you're
Yeah,
in the
there's a
club,
little bit of that.
and then you throw in neurodiversity to all of that and your own like creative endeavors, and it's a lot. And so
Mhm.
can you
Mhm.
share one piece of advice, and it's unsolicited at this point, so if you listeners, if you're
Okay.
not in a place to receive advice, you're permission to move on to the next one. If you had one piece of advice for the listeners out there who may be in this position of juggling life and creativity, or life and self-care, or life and emotional regulation, what is the thing that you wish they knew?
No, everyone's doing it.
Hmm.
And you're not alone. And I know that's so trite, but you aren't, because every time I think I'm the only person like on my work team who's dealing with a thing, I get 1,000 Slack messages of like, oh no, this thing happened and I can't do this because of this. And like my house is burning to the ground. And, or like, my cousin's in the hospital or something. I was in a car accident. And it's like life is constantly happening. And it isn't, this is something that I have definitely learned over the years. Life is not just happening to you. Life is happening to everyone. You are, you're amazing. You're a lovely person, but you're not that special. Um, and I wrote an entire book about a woman who really felt that way, that life was only happening to her and that she must be like just bad luck. And because she sees the highlight reels, she sees everybody else succeeding and getting what they want and getting it on the right timeline, which is huge for me. Like there is no right timeline, and the people who think there is are highly judgmental. Am I wrong? Like
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there. You don't get to tell other people when the right time is for them to have a child or when they should be happening. And guess what? Their body might not be on that same page. Their brain is, but their body's not. So what are you going to do about that? It's not your problem. A lot of feels about that, just say. But it's not just happening to you. You are in the same boat as everybody else. And other people are just really good at pretending in a way that you might not be. And I'm not saying get better at pretending. I'm just saying face that reality. See it.
Mhm.
See the pretending, see the realness, and understand the difference and learn it. And you will find the real people who are in the world who are like, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, this isn't what I wanted. I wish I had kids. I wish I didn't have kids. I wish, everything was different. Grass is always greener kind of thing. Um, and the people who are like, I love my life. It's perfect. Are the people you kind of want to stay away from. Sorry. That's my
because
advice.
because life is happening to everyone, because
Yeah.
life is happening to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And no amount of success. I mean, money is great. You can throw money at problems all day long, but no amount of success is going to make life better. You want the kid, you get the kid, and now you have a kid, and you have everything that comes along with that. And you can look at other people and say, yeah, you're right, this is hard. Um, and for me, I was realistic. I said, I know it's going to be hard, but I don't care. That's kind of how I was. I know this. I know the childbirth's going to be painful, but I don't care. I know that I'm going to be changing poopy diapers for the next 4 years. I don't care. Okay. I'm not naive idiot. I know. I've seen other people go through it. I know what it looks like. I don't care. And that's always been my attitude. Is it's the one thing where I was like, I'm going to get on this sinking ship because I want to be on the ship. So take with that whatever you want, take it with a grain of salt, but that's my perspective on the whole thing.
Mhm. Oh, thank you, Amy, for this gloriously rich conversation. Everything from, struggling to have a child and the timeline of all of that to becoming one and the neurodiverse aspects of all of that and the hairbrush, your kids getting attached to the random items that you gotta navigate those things. And so thank you so much for being here. And anybody listening, if you would like to rate the podcast or give us a review or connect with Amy or me. Our links are all below in the show notes. And I wish you a wonderful day, whatever your day needs to be.
Thanks so much, Kayla.